Hi, I'm Margaret, and thank you so much for joining me here on the Gardening Me on this rather windy evening. So I hope this audio is okay and that doesn't interfere with it. I'm sitting here beside one of my veggie beds that contains my gorgeous, gorgeous marigolds. I'll be showing you those in a minute, kind of closer up. And today I thought I would do a tour of the veggie garden. Now, I haven't done a tour of the garden in about 2 months. I think the last one I did was in July, and I was actually hoping to do one every month, even just for my own personal records to see how stuff was doing year to year. And I've done that a lot in the past through photographs, but I've never really done video before, and I thought it would be interesting just to see how well or poorly things were doing, just as a comparison. But I didn't get around to it in August. It was with vacations and the heat, and I don't know, just didn't happen. So here we are, middle of September, and things are rolling. They're not even really winding down that much yet, surprisingly, other than a few odds and sods like the cucumbers that are dealing with powdery mildew and the tomatoes that are kind of iffy this year. I think everything is, kind of chugging along still. I am in zone 5 in southern Ontario, and our first frost date is in the beginning of October. I believe around the 3rd of October is the official date for the first frost, which really is just around the corner. That's 3 weeks from now, maybe even a little less. At this point in time, my thinking kind of shifts a little bit from eating stuff fresh, so picking a few tomatoes or a cucumber or some leafy greens and bringing those into the kitchen and making them, to preserving. And how can I basically harvest a bunch of stuff and preserve it so that I can enjoy it over the winter? And there is actually quite a lot to harvest in that end. There are a lot of leafy greens especially that I need to get picking and blanching and freezing. But anyhow, why don't we get started? Let me show you my sunflower. A couple of people have said they wanted to see it. Probably not the best light. And actually I've had to cut a couple of stems from it because they did break under the weight of all the blooms, but I am so enjoying this, and so are my neighbors. I've had a couple of requests now for seeds from this guy. I actually will add some footage here as well of this when it started to really bloom a couple of weeks ago before those stems broke. We have had a few rains and stuff in the meantime that have also weighted things down, and I don't know whether the stems perhaps aren't as strong as they could be, or whether it simply is the weight of the blooms, because some of these branches have 5, even 6 blooms on one branch. And the branches are not that thick. They're maybe half an inch thick or so, like the branches that hold the actual flowers from the main stem. And I'm not sure if I mentioned before, but last year I did grow a variety of different sunflowers. None of them were like this, but I'm wondering if perhaps one of the parents of the hybrids that I grew, because I think, maybe half of them were hybrids. Maybe this is one of the parents of those hybrids. So here are the bean plants, half of this bed. These are all 8 by 4 foot beds, and half of this bed is beans. I have 4 varieties of beans, and no, I don't usually grow dahlias amongst the beans, but with the winds we've had in the last week or so, I guess I should have staked the dahlias. I've never really had an issue with dahlias falling over, but I've also never grown dahlias in raised beds where they get consistent water and where they get really rich soil. So perhaps that has contributed to them maybe getting a little bit taller. This dahlia here, the stem goes all the way over there, and it's actually starts way over there. So these beans are actually still producing. I have 4 different varieties in this bed, and I did a couple of videos already on them, so I'm not going to go through all that again, but they are still producing. There was a little bit of a lull there about, 3 weeks ago or so, maybe a little longer when it was really, really hot. And what'll happen with beans is when it does get really hot, then they will for a time stop producing. But then when the temperatures cool off again, then they'll start producing once again. And that's basically what's happened. Look at that. See? We still have stuff happening. Oh, and as I'm talking here, I'm hearing buzzy bees. They love the dahlias, especially these dahlias that have the open centers. Love them. Should I talk a little bit about my dahlias, even though this is a veggie garden tour? I'll just talk about one of my kind of half disappointment, half not. Because look at this gloriousness, right? Isn't this beautiful? Gorgeous, gorgeous. I love like the cactus kind of shape of it. I think there are cactus dahlias, aren't there? Well, I think this is probably one of them. The disappointment comes in when this was supposed to be cafe au lait. So while I love it, after all these years, I was so excited to finally have cafe au lait in the garden, still don't have it. But there's always next year, right? It is gorgeous though, isn't it? Obviously, I have absolutely no idea what variety that is, but it will be back next year. This is the Swiss chard bed. Well, part of the bed is Swiss chard, but it's going crazy. The great thing about Swiss chard is that for me, it makes a really great spinach substitute. So what I will likely do is I will do a mass picking here, and then I will actually blanch it and freeze it in individual little packets, kind of the same size as what you would get at the supermarket for frozen spinach. And then I can just use that throughout the winter as frozen spinach. It works out really well. I have a few varieties here. This one here with the colorful stems is Bright Lights, and I have 4 plants of these. And there's another one there, all Bright Lights. These leaves are so massive. This one in here, I'll just go up like this, that's Fort Hook Giant right in the middle there with the sun on the leaves. And the one in front of Fort Hook Giant is a packet I got when I was in Portugal a couple of years ago, and it's called Verde de, just gonna grab the label here because there we go. That's what it's called, Verde de Pensa Branca. To me, it looks very similar to Fort Hook Giant, although Fort Hook Giant is coming out kind of tall, and this is a bit more sprawly. Also, you'll see I do have a little bit of leaf miner damage. That's what's down here. But I find that the leaf miner damage in our area is really heavy, more in the spring and early summer. And in fact, I had this bed covered at that point. But I think around mid-July, I uncovered the bed because after that, we really don't have much. I mean, the odd leaf will have some damage, but it's not bad at all. It's a bit of a pain covering and uncovering the beds, especially when you're talking about leaves that get this tall. So I just prefer to take, the little bit of damage we have in the latter part of the summer and keep the bed uncovered. This here is my favorite variety, and it is called Peppermint. It's beautiful, it's really tasty. And this is another variety here that I'm growing this year for the first time, and it's called Perpetual. And it has much smaller stalks and leaves. In front here of the Swiss chard is my latest seeding of lettuce, and it's getting a good size here. I have, I think, 4 different varieties. There I have Devil's Ear and Concept Batavian, and these 2 I also grew in the spring. And here's a new to me variety, Crisp Mint, and it's a romaine style. But even though it's a romaine style, I'll still be just picking the outer leaves and letting the inner leaves continue to grow. And this guy here, I think, is a new to me variety too. And I'm trying to see, I don't have a tag. Actually, I did have a tag, but I think the tag fell apart. I will put the name on the screen, but it looks to me like this is also a romaine type lettuce potentially. On the other side of the bed, there are 4 different varieties of beets. Some are doing a lot better than others. I think I may have sown the ones down here a little bit too close to the chard, and so they were a little bit more shaded than the ones on this side of the bed. So in here I'm growing a number of colored beets, and none of them are red because I'm not a fan of red beets, but all the other varieties I really like. So in here I have Golden Boy, which is a yellow beet. I have Chioga, I believe it's how it's pronounced, which is the one that has the pink and white rings. I also have Avalanche, that's what's there, the sort of smallish row there at the front. The last one there is Gourmet Blend, and it is a botanical interests blend of a variety of different beets. On this side of the bed, I have the carrots that I sowed quite a while ago, and I think it was mid-July. At this point, I'm thinking it's a 50-50 chance as to whether they will actually end up maturing before we get our first frost. And my concern isn't so much with the frost itself, because in fact that'll probably make these carrots even sweeter. My concern is more with them really slowing down in growth as the weather gets chillier. All of these carrots, the days to maturity should have landed them to mature at the end of September, and just from the size of them you can tell that's probably not going to happen because that's only a couple of weeks from now. I'm thinking that where I put them, right beside this ginormous Swiss chard, probably shaded them a little. We might be looking at baby carrots here. And right here we have some rather sad looking late sown kohlrabi as well. And as you can see, there is a lot of damage here. I don't really see any cabbage worms, but I did see a couple previously. So some of these got practically eaten down to the core, so I don't think anything's going to happen with those, but they're still super tiny. These can size up relatively quickly, so we do still have at least 3 weeks before our expected first frost, and a lot can happen. And here we have our kale. There's 5 varieties of kale in here, and this we have been eating quite a lot, but oh man, kale is just a workhorse in the garden. Here is red ursa, and beside that is white Russian, and behind the red ursa is red Russian, and peeking up from the back is the dinosaur kale. And then sneaking underneath, because we have a little tiny one, and I thought it would be okay in the corner here. This is Starboar. This kale here, I have not harvested actually anything from it yet. This is Beta Tranchuda, and this kale is the one, and the one beside it as well, that you would use to make the Portuguese kale soup. It's like a potato kale soup. It's really good, but I haven't made any this summer, so I haven't actually harvested anything from these yet. But what I'm thinking of doing is, just like with the chard, I think I'm going to harvest it, blanch it, cut it up into these really almost like a chiffonade kind of thing, really thin, and then put it in packages that will be great to have as soups over the winter, which is really when we normally have most of our soups. This one here actually bolted. So, yeah, and not only bolted, okay, it's actually doing a little bit of service to the garden. Why? Because of this. I don't know, can we see this? I'm trying to focus in on these. There are an army of aphids on this. And the great thing about this is I haven't really seen aphids on anything else. So if this is the sacrificial plant for aphids, I'm okay with that. This variety is called Lisa Galega, and it is also one that is supposed to be really good for the Portuguese soup. The problem is that now that it's bolted, I don't know. I'm thinking, let me taste it actually. before I say anything. So it has a little bit of a bitter aftertaste, so I don't think I'm actually going to use this now that it's bolted, but it's being my friend. It's keeping the aphids away from everything else. The tomato beds. I don't know. Every time I walk by these beds, there's only a few tomatoes that I'm actually really happy about at the moment, and everything else kind of, I don't know, makes me a little bit sad when I see it. So I'm actually thinking that even though these plants look not too bad, I mean, most of them look not too bad. There's a couple that are definitely on the way out, but I may actually just pull all these out, other than I think maybe 2 or 3 that are still producing enough and that don't make me sad every time I walk by. Okay, Brandywine. I have yet to harvest a Brandywine tomato. They haven't even turned red yet, which is really odd because normally these guys turn red for me, usually I would say by the end of August. Early September at the latest. So I have yet to harvest one Brandywine tomato. Here is one of my favorites. I am going to pick this one. This is an awesome paste tomato. Why? Because it's so huge. I mean, you don't need a lot of these to make some sauce. This one is called Amos Coley. I grow it every year. Normally it's quite productive, but this year I think I've harvested 4 or 5 of them so far. I'm just gonna leave that there. I'm gonna grab these after. Here's the Costoluto Genovese. There's one there. I'm just gonna pull it as well. Oh, maybe not, because it's actually stuck to this and I'll probably end up pulling both off. There's a few here. These are very, very odd ones. What is this called? Fasciation or something like that? When the blossom sort of gets, I don't know, fused or something. 2 blossoms are fused. I'm not sure. There's a word for it. But there are a lot of these kind of tomatoes on this variety for some reason. Much more than normal. I may get 1 in a season, but this is very unusual. So this is Speckled Roman, and normally they're gorgeous tomatoes. I've never had this on them. So that's new. Normally they're just beautiful, smooth, with that sort of streaking, the gold kind of streaking. Aunt Ruby's German Green. Okay, so here I'm following this. Oh my goodness, there's a huge one in here. Oh, look at this guy. It has the same issue as the Costoluto Genovese. Look at that. That is huge. Now, since it's a green tomato, I've actually never grown green tomatoes before. Oh, you know what else is huge? That huge weed right there. Let's get that out. Uh-oh. I have to come back and get the root out for that. I think when they're ready, they have a little tiny bit of give. I'm not sure. This is one of the plants that a little worse for wear, I would say. So, but it does have quite a few fruits, like even a few hanging down here. So I think I might just leave it to see what happens, especially because I've never tasted these before. I've never tried them. So I'm really interested to see what the flavor is on those. This is Prudence Purple, and it has literally 1 tomato on it. There it is, 1 tomato. As soon as that tomato starts coloring up, I'm going to pick it, and that vine is out. Going down the line here, we have Apple Yellow. This is one of my favorite cherry tomatoes. Earlier in the season, there were so many split ones, it was crazy. When we got back from holiday, almost every one I picked was split. Now they're back to normal, and they're so delicious. I love them. Here is another favorite of mine, Mexico Midget. They are delicious, and I thought, oh, I'll just, be picking these every time I'm in the garden. But I don't know, I just haven't done that. I'm getting a lot of cracking here as well. Honestly, the thought of coming out here and picking a million little tiny tomatoes hasn't appealed. So I don't think I'll be growing this one next year. Okay, so this one here is Pink Love Apple, and I did harvest 1 whopping tomato from it, and I did take a photo of it or video of it. I will throw it in here. It's an okay variety. Personally, I didn't like it as much as the other varieties I've grown. I wasn't really blown away by the flavor or anything, so I don't think I'm going to be growing that one again. This is another striped Roman tomato. Now what I did is I grew two of these because one was called striped Roman, one was called speckled Roman, and I wanted to see if there's a difference between the two. I don't really see any difference between the two. I think they're basically the same thing with a different name. So this one did particularly badly. There is one lowly tomato just dangling from there. So once again, once this guy starts coloring up, hopefully in the next, I don't know, few days, this vine is coming out. So here is one of my favorite tomatoes. Now, this one is just starting to color up. And this is Mennonite orange. Oh, you know, it's Mennonite orange before I actually see one. Oh, and there's so much of this black stuff on these. I don't really understand what that is. Look at this. Normally these are a beautiful orange. I'm sure I have a photo of Mennonite orange somewhere in my computer that I will put up here as to what it's supposed to look like. Oh my goodness, this, it's still gonna taste delicious. You know, this, I am still gonna eat it. I might kind of work around these dark bits, but this isn't a disease or anything. To me, it seems like some, I don't know, something environmental or something. Anyhow, this is going into the kitchen. One of the most productive tomatoes I have is this, and this is Chico 3. This is a sauce tomato, but it's a small sauce tomato. You could see all those in there, and this is all just one plant here. So there's a lot on here, and I have harvested quite a lot from here already. I did tie them up, but obviously I didn't do a good enough job, and I think what it was by the time I started tying up the stems, they were already falling over, and I didn't really want a chance breaking off stems, so I did what I could, but it wasn't that great. Now to this side of the other bed, these are Bloody Butcher tomatoes. I grow them every year. They're usually one of the first ones to fruit. They didn't do well this year. What's new? And they're quite, I mean, they're not a big tomato by any stretch. They're more of a salad tomato, but this year they're quite small compared to normal even. This is Blush. It had a ton of cracking in my last video where I was harvesting, and since then, it's done so much better because we did not have any kind of downpours, and the watering has basically been just moderate, just like it should be, without an excessive amount all at once like we had with those heavy rains. Lots of tomatoes. It's doing amazing. I think this is the tomato plant we are harvesting from the most. And last but not least is this one. Again, a paste tomato that, again, with this weird sort of coloration on it. This is Opalka. It's an awesome paste tomato that I grow every year. I haven't harvested very many of these either. I don't know, maybe half a dozen or so. Along this row here, I did a late sowing of basil. And look at this. This is gorgeous. This is actually, I can't tell you what variety that is, because this is actually a mix that I got from Botanical Interests. So there's a bunch of different basils in here. And this is obviously a very dark, I don't know, probably purple opal or something. And this one has kind of these green colorations on it as well. And then this one is a little bit different too, because it also is green, but it has kind of like darker bits on it. This is Thai basil. I can tell just by looking at it. So with the dark stems, this is so fragrant. I love it. And it's so pretty too, isn't it? This might be lemon basil. It has a sort of a citrusy smell to it. There's another purple one. This one looks like more the traditional Genovese type basil, and it's looking pretty. And oh, look at this guy here with the blotches. It might be the same kind as the other one where it was mainly purple with a little bit of green. I don't know, but it's beautiful basil smell, just a standard basil smell. I'm wondering if that's cinnamon basil. It kind of has a tiny bit of a cinnamony smell to it. So along this bed of tomatoes I sowed nasturtiums. These were started indoors, and then I transplanted the seedlings out here, and they took a very long time to get going, just like everything else in this bed. There's at least 3 varieties here. One is this beautiful, beautiful creamy color. I really like that. Then I have this, which is sort of a red. And another one of my favorites is these. Let's go from the depressing tomato story to the inspiring and, oh, this one makes me so happy tomato story. And that's the Riesentraub tomato. This is a tomato plant that I planted in another bed in the garden. And this bed, my guess is, had a lot more of my old soil. These are all new beds, and they received a lot of new soil last year because I got rid of my old beds. I did repurpose the soil that was in my old beds, but there are a lot more beds in this area than there used to be. So I had to kind of spread out the old soil that had been amended with compost and manure for years and years and years. This bed probably got a lot more of that, is my guess. And this tomato has done so well. Let's take a look here. Look at this. These I have been picking and picking and picking, and they are delicious. I love them. They're so good. It is definitely an indeterminate tomato. I thought it was actually determinate, so I put it in this kind of rectangular cage, but it is just falling out of there, and there are a ton of tomatoes to pick. I actually just went through this whole plant, I think maybe 3 days ago or so, 4 days ago, and there's a ton more to pick now. But look at how healthy that is, how healthy and huge. That makes me feel good. My beautiful, beautiful marigolds. These are Colossus Red Gold. I love them. They are so gorgeous. I kind of have them here tucked behind the tomato. I also have another variety called Kilimanjaro White, which I am not a fan of. It's only had 2 or 3 flowers so far. I probably won't be growing that one next year. And here I have the parsley, which we have picked and picked and picked, and it's just doing amazingly well. This is just from seed that I saved. I prefer the flat leaf parsley, so all of this is flat leaf. There are 4 plants in here. And, oh, you see those? Peppers. Let's go around to the other side. Take a look at the peppers. I'm growing 8 varieties of peppers this year, and this is the first one. This is pepperoncino peppers. Right there. And these plants are always loaded. Look at that. What I do with them is I pickle them and put them in salads. Here are Anaheim. I'm just going to grab one of these. I usually harvest some green. Here's what they look like. And what I often do with these is I will char them, get rid of the skin, get rid of the seeds, and then I will save them in the freezer to use already ready to go into whatever dish I want. They're delicious. They're only mildly spicy. This here is Fiorello, which is a sweet pepper. There are quite a lot in here, actually. Well, there's a couple here that still need to get a little bit riper. And here I have another sweet pepper. This one's called Chervena Shushka, and it was recommended to me by another Ontario gardener in that it would grow really well in our climate. It has beautifully thick walls, and it's a delicious pepper. Next to it is another pepper called Shusido, and this one is one of those that you often have as an appetizer, where you char it in a hot skillet for a little bit, and then you basically sprinkle a little salt on it, and there you go. There are a ton in here. This one is a variety I got from Portugal, and it is actually one of my best varieties as well. So this is Dos from Spain, and it is, again, delicious, sweet, Really like it. On this one plant, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 peppers plus the one I picked. So that's pretty good. This pepper here is starfish. Look at this. This has so many fruits all over it. All over it. I cannot wait. I'm just really hoping. This is quite the big plant, actually. I'm very impressed. It was very slow to get going, but now it's just, I mean, they're everywhere. So I am super excited about this one. I really hope, though, that they start ripening up before the frost. That's my only concern, is that we'll get those frosts and these will still be green. So there's a little tiny pepper plant here, and it is being completely overshadowed by the gigantic Riesentraub tomato plant, by the marigolds, and then over here by the parsley. So it really hasn't stood a good chance of doing anything, but it has given me 3 little peppers here. And this is Odessa. Again, a sweet pepper, really nice flavor. I've grown it before. I don't think it's ever been a super productive variety, but I think this year it's definitely, I mean, you can see it, the poor little thing squeezed in there. Here we have, ooh, beautiful eggplant plant. I have a couple of white ones. This is Thai Princess. This is Thai Green. This plant back here is a ping tongue, and I do not have any on there right now. And this one here, I'm actually thinking next year I'm only going to grow this one, which is the Farmer's Long. It is very similar to ping tongue. It is long and thin, but it's actually longer and thinner than ping tongue, which I quite like, actually. And here it is. The other thing about this one is it's very productive. There's another one back there. And here are the cucumbers that are just producing and producing. Here is Summer Dance. And oof, there's a pile of them in there. I am constantly picking cucumbers. This has been a phenomenal cucumber year, I must say. Really happy with them. Here is Green Finger, which was a late one to get going, but still the foliage still looks a lot better. And look, still blooming. There's the female flower, little baby cucumbers there. I think I was a little too harsh in first judging this one and saying, well, I'm not going to be growing this one anymore because it doesn't really produce, because really it has been a trooper when it comes to avoiding powdery mildew. There's a few little splotches on the leaves, but nothing significant, and it just keeps producing right now when the other ones are starting to peter out. Well, not Summer Dance. That one is still producing too. That one's another trooper. This was a late sowing of summer squash that I did. I didn't sow any summer squash at all this spring. I often avoid summer squash because we have pretty big pressure from squash vine borers in the early spring, but partway through the year, they're basically done. You don't have to worry about them. So I sowed a bunch of different varieties of squash here. None of them germinated. I don't know what happened, if perhaps animals got to them or birds got to them, or I don't know, but not a single one. And there were, I believe, 2 varieties. There was a blend and another scallop squash variety in here. Because I was so busy in the garden, I didn't actually realize that it had been 2 weeks or something like this since I sowed them. And one day I just thought, how come I haven't seen the squash yet? And I went and I looked, and not one plant. And then I looked at my little notes to see when I sowed them, and it was 2 weeks ago. And squash comes up really quickly, like it should have been up in a few days. I thought maybe there was something wrong with my seeds. Anyhow, so what I did is I actually sowed a bunch more, this time indoors. And they actually did come up, as you can see. But now we're talking 2.5 weeks after they should have been sown. And there is no chance from the size of these that I will be getting any squash before frost. I'm letting them be just to see what happens, not expecting much, but next year when I do this, I'll definitely be starting them indoors. And here I have my onion bed, and we have really bad issues with leek moth, which is why it is covered in netting. It's still gonna be another week or so until I harvest. Look at those down there. Gorgeous, huh? The onion harvest, it's one of my favorite harvests of the year. I don't know why. It's so satisfying when you harvest these really big onions. Oh, it's so amazing. And I have a variety of red ones, and I have white ones. I have a couple of sweet varieties, one called Spanish Medallion, one called Elsa Craig. So I am really looking forward to the harvest. Here are the broccoli plants. I was actually going to be pulling these, but I haven't. I haven't, because I am still getting little tiny shoots like this and like this. So initially I thought I wasn't going to be getting any shoots, but I just left the plants a couple of weeks and more started coming. So yeah, they're delicious. Here, besides the broccoli, is something I am super excited about. And what these are Brussels sprouts. And I am so excited. I have several different varieties in here. Some are further along than others, but all of them have the little sprouts happening. This is Jade Cross. I think this is a pretty popular variety. The sprouts are pretty tiny still, but yeah, this one is maybe the size of like bigger than a marble for sure. This one is Groninger. I think this one might be Speedy, the variety. And look at these sprouts. I mean, I think some of these might be ready to pick. They're so big. I'd say maybe 1 inch across. And I think they're supposed to be 1 to 2 inches across. Is that right? I'm thinking these are going to be ready very soon. So exciting. So I hope you enjoyed this tour of the veggie garden. I am overall really happy with how stuff has done, considering the circumstances this year, which I've talked about ad nauseum, I feel like. So yeah, I really have a lot of harvesting to do and preserving. You know what? Let me stand beside here. Hold on a sec. Okay, this is the chard. This is me. There's my shoulder. There's the chard. That's how big the chard is. Anyway, I just wanted to show you that, because sometimes you can't get perspective on, you know, how big stuff is until you actually see like a person standing beside it or something. Yeah, those plants are huge. So they're going to make some great eating this winter. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today, and we will see you next time. Bye.